Hi, this is Elaine Benfield, and welcome to another episode of Herstories. So, I always say this, I'm super excited about my guest. I have Cynthia Smith here with me, and welcome, Cynthia.
Thank you.
So, I'm excited, many reasons, and this is a topic that is super dear to my heart. But I first want to talk every time I'm on Her Stories, I always talk about why someone's inspiring. And we met years ago when our one of our children were going through like elementary school, and I liked Cynthia right away. I remember, great laugh, super hardworking. I found you really creative, but also you had an intuition, and there's something about you now. This kind of pulls into the topic. And we've been friends, and I just rely on you as in my inner circle. And you inspire me with your career, which I'm sure you'll talk about as well. So I'm super excited to have Cynthia here and join me today on Her Stories.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
So let's kick it off by, who is Cynthia? Tell us a little bit about you.
Okay. I grew up in Maryland and I went to school in Connecticut and ended up moving to Atlanta years and years ago. And for the last 25 years, I've worked in the executive offices at Delta Airlines. And I'm a mom to an 18-year-old boy who's about to go to college. So that's a big turning point in our household. And we're super excited to see him find his path
And flourish,
and
really.
yeah,
He
exactly.
he's an amazing kid. They've done a great job raising him. Really, just a complete delight. So the topic we're going to talk about is genealogy.
That's correct.
So for me and anyone that knows me, I have, I have an interesting background with my family coming together. My cousin Leslie has been doing this for our family for years, but she just shares things with us, and I don't really know how she does it. And I'd love you, first of all, like explain to people what genealogy is, because I think a lot of people think of it as like 23andMe and some of those, but explain what genealogy is and what the overall.
Sure. Well, genealogy is the study of your ancestors, the history of your family.
Mhm.
And in my case, I also had a family who was interested in this. My grandfather always kept track of his ancestors, and he recorded it so that became part of an organization called the Sons of the American Revolution, and he
Wow.
shared that with my father, and then my father shared it with us. So it was always family history has always been a theme that we've known about. But when I'm like in eighth grade, I was like, this is kind of boring.
Yeah. Yeah. It's because we all had to do it.
Right.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
really wasn't as interested as I should have been. But for me, it became more interesting when my older sister was the first one to get interested in it. And she started sharing stories about finding different family connections that we never even knew about. And then I said, well, that's kind of
What
interesting.
made her, like, what triggered her? Just knowing the family, and as we get older, you do want to almost be reconnected with your ancestors. Like, do you feel that
Exactly.
that's part of aging, that you're like, oh, well, what were they doing at this age?
Right, right.
And did your sister kind of have that, and then it kind of spawned into
It
you?
did. It did. She sort of she knew a little bit because of her
Mhm.
grandfather, but then she wanted to broaden her knowledge of how our
Mhm.
ancestors immigrated and where did they actually come
Mhm.
from, because you sort of know there's a family lore, and then you find documents to back
Mhm.
up what you've been told. And that's what ancestry
It really is.
it does. It's the genealogy is confirming
Mhm.
the stories you've been told
Yeah.
with the documents that are available for research. And it's very easy right now because we do have online platforms like Ancestry that provide all
Mhm.
of the data that you need. It's just a matter of putting it together and using a little bit of sleuthing skills in
Yeah.
order to map out your ancestors.
Well, and it's interesting because I feel, and before my mother passed away, I did the 23andMe,
Mhm.
but it was the DNA piece, like who's connected. But to me, what you're doing and what I'm so fascinated by is it's so much more than that. It's research to piece together the story. DNA, of course, is very important, but then it's the whole level of like pulling out those stories and finding articles and photos.
Right.
So tell me more about that. How do you do it and how did you
I
know?
think that's when I really got interested
Mhm.
in creating my family tree. Is someone gave me an ancestry DNA kit for
Mhm.
Christmas one year. And so I said, okay, well, this is cool. And so I sent my kit off for analysis. And in the meantime, you have 6 weeks or so while you're waiting. And I started
Mhm.
putting together the stuff that I knew,
Yeah.
and then you start finding um, documents that you didn't know
Yeah.
were out there.
Yeah.
And I started learning about the census
And
reports.
and you started researching and you literally used Google to go, well, and you just did keywords. Like how'd you even know to even go like census we hear about,
Yep.
but how did you know what to search for almost?
Well, when you enter the platform of Ancestry, you're in a community of people who share information. And
Okay.
so your mother and father and grandfather may have had other people who began research, and you can see
Interesting.
what they've done.
Mhm.
And then the other thing is it's a collection of it's a warehouse of document information, like
Mhm.
the U.S. Census report
Yeah.
was key.
Yeah.
Like, because every 10 years, the
Yeah.
census is performed, and they release the census publicly
Yeah.
years and years after. So the latest census report that was released is 1950,
Yeah.
but we're looking for ancestors who were born in 1890.
Yeah, 1800s. Yeah.
And that's all available. So when
That's
you
wild.
search on a name
Mhm.
and you know where they're maybe know
Born.
where they were
Born.
born,
Yeah.
the census report will pop right up.
That's amazing.
And then you can see what they were doing, where
Yeah.
they lived, and it gives you a lot of information that you had no idea about.
Yeah, that's amazing. So tell me more as you've kind of uncovered your family.
Yeah,
Because I always, there's stories and there's some people that are going to watch that have found really stuff they didn't know about their families, and it can be good, it can be bad. But tell us
right.
more about like, so what have you found, and like, what are you?
Well, I think the most interesting one was the stories related to my great grandmother.
Hmm.
My grandfather was a musician, and we always knew that he had a hard childhood, but he didn't like to talk a lot about it.
Hmm.
And he passed away, when I was probably a freshman in college. So he's been long gone. And so when I set out and started building my tree, I started looking
Yeah.
more. What is the story of his parents? Because he didn't like to talk about it. And uh, the interesting about Ancestry is it's linked to newspapers.com. So
Interesting.
I found, where they lived, and I found that they owned a grocery store, and then that my great grandfather's parents owned the
Mhm.
grocery store, and that they were immigrants from Germany, and they were Jewish, which was an interesting.
Oh, that is
On
interesting.
my DNA report, I had 1% Jewish,
Yeah.
and I was able to trace it back to my great great grandfather.
That's wild. And you had no idea.
No idea.
Did you know the German ancestry too, or
Well, my
no?
mother's maiden name is Frank, and we all
Yeah,
know Anne Frank.
Frank. Yeah, of
Yeah.
course.
So
Yeah.
there was a family rumor
Yeah.
that we were, some percentage of Jewish, but we did not know
No. Yeah.
where it stemmed from. And I was able, through DNA, which showed
Yeah.
I had that, and then through the documents, I was able to
Mhm.
see uh, he was a Jewish immigrant from Germany.
Yeah.
And so, but there was a lot of tragedy,
Yeah. And
in.
what year was he born? Like what was his
So my great grandfather was born in 1870 something.
something? Okay.
And he was married in 1897. So it's the generation before
Yeah.
that emigrated from Germany.
Yeah. Okay.
His father did.
Yeah.
So
Which is the quintessential when I think of immigrants. We talk about like my mom, she came over on, I want to say, the Queen Elizabeth II. She took a ship but didn't have to go through Ellis Island, or that's my understanding.
yeah.
Which I need to really dig into
Yeah.
it. But at that time, you went through Ellis Island. That was the way you came
Right.
through as an immigrant.
Yeah.
So like now that brings up
You
the
can find-
visuals of that.
Exactly. And that's another piece of information you can find. You can find the boat, and
That's
you can
wild.
find the manifest list from the boat. where your ancestor
Mhm.
entered the country originally.
Yeah.
And I've been able to do it for many, and including that particular ancestor from Germany. But
Yeah, that's amazing. And what so when you see that, and now you've showed me, and I'll have to find a way to show some of the pictures. You showed me some of the black and white photos. Like seeing that, have you ever seen those photos before?
those photos were from albums that had been sitting around.
Yeah.
My mother and her cousin. Nobody really knew who the people were.
Yeah.
It's a lot
Yeah,
of
because it
phenomena.
passes through the
Yeah, and
generations.
we're talking, more than 100 years ago,
Yeah.
150 years ago. So the thing that was interesting was to have the face,
Yeah.
have the tracing, being able to trace that
Yeah.
person's history through census reports and then newspaper articles.
Yeah.
And the newspaper articles where I found some very, interesting. Um,
Like, is there stuff you want to share? Like, what
well,
did you find?
uh, my great grandmother and great grandfather divorced.
Wow. And
Yeah,
back then they really didn't do that, right?
no, and it was written in the newspaper
Wow.
about their trial, their divorce trial. And her husband, my great grandfather, accused her of cheating, and the judge did not award her any marital support, and it was $15 a month
Oh my God.
for child support, and she had 3 children.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So, and then great grandfather disappears. Like I can't find him in the 1930s
Wow.
census. And then,
And that's the grandfather you were saying that had a child, didn't want to talk about his childhood?
that's my grandfather. So
That's a
it's their
grandfather's
child.
It's their child.
Yeah.
Wow.
So it says, okay, we heard he had a difficult
Yeah.
time. He had to quit school in 8th grade and he was a musician.
Yeah.
And so I go over to newspaper.com and I say, well, what else can I find? And they had a house, and uh, my great grandmother rented
Mhm.
the basement to a tenant. Lo and behold, you find that he died of gas asphyxiation.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So there's a newspaper article about, Mrs. Frank, tenant.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. And then I knew that my grandfather had left school and worked as a musician as early as, 8th, 9th grade. And again, I did a newspaper search on him, and you could see that he was playing all around the area
Well,
that
and
he lived in.
so you're musically inclined.
Right. There's a
Did you
thread.
ever, because there's a thread to that then that you're like, wait a second, it really is in your DNA. Because you're a very talented musician in your own right.
Well, in my childhood,
Yes, but
absolutely.
it's going
Yeah.
back to what, because you always loved it.
I always loved it.
Yeah.
And
And I
again,
am not.
yeah.
So like to me, I'm like, oh, you're really good. Like you are very talented. But to know it's really in your DNA
It's
is
a
really
DNA thread that comes through, and then when
Yeah.
you see that, you say, "Oh, well, what else do I share
Yeah.
with the ancestors that
Yeah.
are not just entries on a family tree?
Yeah.
They were real people who were living life and having challenges, and that's what's made it very fascinating to me. It's like,
Well, and I also find it like when you shared the photos with me, the photos bring it to life, but then the articles bring it to life. It's almost that catch of you. I have so many photos, I don't know who they are
right,
in the same, and they all look the same. They have these beautiful, dresses, and they go to the beach, and they have the parasols or whatever.
yes,
And that was a snapshot in time, but there's a lot that I have no idea who, and no
right,
one in my family, those generations have passed on. That it's really my cousins and I are trying to piece it together, going, we're now the older generation.
right,
And so
yeah,
to see, it's almost like, I don't know which one's more fun, piecing together the articles that match with the person you didn't know who they were, or seeing them kind of come to life because
exactly.
they're like obviously real, but it's that
Well,
you don't
that's
have
where
that connection.
where a person interested in genealogy can help you, because if you have just a little bit of information that's written on the back, a date, a last name, someone who has an interest in this can take that and then go back into ancestry and try to pinpoint who it might be based on skills of reading documents and connecting
Mhm.
to the information you have through family lore.
So what's the most fulfilling piece of doing this, because you and I've talked about it, and I wanted to interview you on this topic because you light up when you talk about it, because it's like you are a detective, you are doing research, which you're fantastic at, and it's tying the history to like today. Is there, like, tell me more, because I think that's really interesting.
I think that's exactly what makes it interesting for me. It's like it's being able to um, tie your own current family history to your ancestors, and then it's taking a new look at history and placing your ancestors there. You know, what was going on in 1890.
Yeah.
And when I see the picture of my great grandfather's grocery store, it was a horse and wagon that he took.
Isn't that amazing?
You know, and delivered to customers. And I'm thinking, wow, that's just 2 generations.
Yeah, it's not that long ago.
It is not that long ago. And think about the progress.
Yeah.
And then it makes me want to look ahead. What will people say about me when my son's grandson is doing his family history and he's taking a look back? There I'll be. And what is he saying about me? So that makes you sort of say, well, I better, like, this is your mark, and people will want to look back and see who you are and what you did.
Well, and it's also where you came from. I think I don't want to get political, but we forget sometimes that it was hard. Those times were so different. Immigrating was so hard. Like, that, to me, that's what America's all about. But to find that and be like, I knew that this generation had to sacrifice and leave.
Yeah.
And to come here and start completely fresh.
From scratch, exactly.
Is to me, because that's the same that my cousin found. Because I'm half Jewish, my ancestors were Ashkenazi Jews.
Right.
They came over and were the first settlers in Key West.
Oh, that's very interesting.
So we found out that they knew Edgar Allan Poe, and they were in, they knew Ernest Hemingway.
Yep.
And they were referenced in A Farewell to Arms, and that was my cousin found that we were part of that collective,
that community.
First settlers. I never knew that. And that, to me, they knew FDR, they knew those pictures. My kids were like, they couldn't believe that we could trace back, thankfully, to my cousin Leslie, who really did, dig up all these, put in all the work to know, because now it not only did my mom immigrate, and I'm the first generation on my mom's side.
Yep.
I actually have it from my dad's side. We all came from, a very similar area, which is wild.
It is wild. And so when you just do your DNA, you say, oh, I'm 30%, British, and 40%, Scottish, and then 10%, Irish, and a little bit of this and that. But when you start building the tree and you start looking at the documents, you sort of connect to who the people were and how it happened. And then you start connecting to cousins that go back and back and back. At this point, I'm a little bit crazy. Yeah. I have over 20,000 people on my family tree.
How is that possible? Because it's all these generations.
All the generations. And
oh my God.
The kids had kids who had kids. And I've been able to build up.
Would you ever do a family reunion and be like, okay, come here, this family?
We do family reunions. We focus on one line, though. It's like my father's mother's line.
Because it'd be insane.
Right. No, you can't do the whole.
Have you traced back to, like, anyone famous? Have you traced back to, like, how far back have you gone so far?
I can go back. The great grandmother I'm talking about, who had the person who died in her basement, she's really her, and I don't think she knew it, because her name is Elizabeth Cloud, and her ancestors came from Ireland in the 1600s, and they were Quakers, and they were coming to be able to practice their religion, and they ended up in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, so which is that's where they settled.
Yeah. So it was her line that I can take back the furthest. And it's not because I necessarily did all of that research, but the name Cloud and the community of Quakers that she was a part of from generation back was well known because of their they landed in
Well, and I told you
Pennsylvania.
so, and you and I grew up not far from each other. I grew up in Allentown, and Quakers were such a big part of the Allentown community, that part of Lehigh Valley.
Yep.
I told you, I'm like, that name sounds so familiar, and I'm convinced there's something I learned as a child because we had to study the local religions,
Okay.
we also, the different reservations that were not Lenape and all that. But so I'm telling you that name, I'm like, why does that name stand out? So I'm curious that it'll be
Okay.
fun to like dig into why do
Right.
I know that name?
Right. Well, next time you go to Allentown, check it
have to
out and see if you
check it
find
out.
some clouds in the area,
I know,
because I bet
isn't
there
that
are
fun?
still people named
I
up
just,
there.
yeah, I question that. So you help other people as well. So people are coming to you and they like, you're starting to do this for others. What has, for someone else, what has been the most fulfilling for someone else besides you to help someone?
I think it's when you help them uh, build a tie to their history.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people have a general idea, but they
Mm-hmm.
can't look at a picture, or they can't see that they lived at 214 Harrison Street
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
Philadelphia. And then the census reports also list what their occupation was. So it's
That's
interesting to see that your great great grandparent was a physician, or
Yeah.
mine were mostly laborers and farmers,
Yeah.
and but it's interesting to help people
Yeah.
find the connection to the past, and help them find the thread that runs through their family from their
Yeah.
great grandparents to the present day. And it's teaching people that it's not that intimidating, and at the end of the day it might have been boring in 8th grade, but there's a little bit more there's a little
Yeah.
bit more interest when you get to be a certain age and you have your own kids, and you want to be able to share
Mm-hmm.
where you came from with them.
What about the future? So have you been able to help, and you can tell what you're comfortable talking about, to find people today, to find those connections with family members? Is that also part of the navigating?
Yeah,
Because it's the past, but then it's also people want to know, like, who am I also connected to today?
exactly.
So,
Well,
whatever you're comfortable talking about,
well,
because I know
when I first um, took I started being able to look at DNA
Mm-hmm.
and make connections with family members of my own, right? When you
Yeah.
get your DNA back, you get a list of people that you're connected to.
Mm-hmm.
So it's sort of interesting to say, well, how am I connected to that
Yeah.
person? But then people who've been adopted and they don't know anything about their
Mm-hmm.
birth family origins,
Yeah.
I'm also able to take a DNA report and on Ancestry sort of work backwards. And
That's amazing.
I would take a family, if you have a first cousin,
Yeah.
then you build a family tree,
Based off that.
based off the first cousin,
Wow.
and then you're able to sort
Mhm.
of work them in and figure out who their birth parents might be. So I've been able to do that for quite a few people. It's really something I've done for friends and for friends
Yeah.
of friends, but
Yeah, but that's amazing. So it's not only, I mean, we're talking about the past and why it's important to know, but also adoption is prevalent,
Yeah.
and to know where you came from. In the end, no matter who we are, we do want to know where we came from. And
We
that
want-
adoption piece
Yeah.
is incredible.
right, because adoptions in most states are closed, so you can't get a copy of your birth certificate that lists your birth your family of origin.
Yeah.
But using DNA, and a person like me who's interested in genealogy, you can find out where you came from
Yeah.
and who you are. Because the one person I know always thought that they were of Greek descent. They thought I'm Greek, and I had to tell him, you're not Greek at all. You're not Greek at all. You're
Was he so,
Scottish.
oh my God, was he so surprised?
Very surprised.
Yeah. Yeah.
Very surprised. And being able to show, a person their family tree.
Yeah.
And it sort of just gives them closure, because really their family that they grew up with, posted as they were adopted, is their family.
Yeah.
But when you want to know what your DNA,
Yeah.
then there are ways to figure it out, even if you don't have a birth certificate.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I'm sure I have more stories that I want to share of, like, a lot of people have done DNA and then they realize the father wasn't their father, the mother wasn't, or their brother was not. Like it has opened up such an interesting the last few years
Yeah.
of this. Do you really know who your
Yeah.
family is? Like
Some of those have popped up in my family tree as well. It's like, and I tell my family the DNA does not lie.
no,
Does
no,
not lie. So we found a great grandfather on the other side of the family who was adopted,
yeah,
and nobody ever knew.
yeah.
And
We had it on my side. So with my mother's DNA, I still have it, and I'm in like and I keep it.
uh-huh.
And I had someone who came to me and said, "Oh, I'm a product of German, like an American soldier, and I was born in the '50s in Germany. And your DNA, we have the same like grandparents or something, same connection." And so of course I go. My mom was alive at the time. I go to my aunt in Germany, and everyone's like, "We don't know," and I'm like, "Well." He's related to us. So we ended up, so it was actually kind of sad. And that they tried to say, oh, no, it didn't happen. I'm like, no. My grandfather's sister, one of the sisters, there's no doubt she had a child out of wedlock with an American soldier in Germany. And so long and behold, I was like, oh, I wish I knew. And I had no idea for this gentleman who's, was born in the 50s. I'm like, I'm so sorry, but my family, no one talked about it.
No one knew.
But the DNA, and I'm like, so I see in the family tree his name, and I'm like, this poor man who, like, all he wanted to know.
Right.
But no one knew. So there's many of those stories. Yeah. And I know with wars, that was super common.
Yes.
I always hear people talk about,
I had a person reach out to me with the same sort of situation, and I was able to figure out which cousin of my mother's it was. And then I found a newspaper article that he was based at the military station in England, that her grandmother.
Wow.
So
it gives me chills because it's like figuring those pieces out.
Yeah, it is a little bit of detective work and a little bit of research, and it's a little bit of luck too when things come up.
Well, and also your determination, because you and I talk about the different things you're looking into, and it's if there's a dead end, I'm like, oh, Cynthia will find another. Like you meander to go, oh no, I'm not done finding. I still think I can find more.
I can find more. Yeah, I think it's just become sort of. It's like some people who like to go down the rabbit hole on TikTok or Instagram. I like to go down the rabbit hole,
which I love,
in genealogy, on Ancestry, and I tell some people do crosswords and I read obituaries. It's
That's what I love about you. That's so great. So talking about, like, do you see this as, it's a passion project, but I also see this as just a fun stage in your life.
Exactly.
Where people are really like coming to you to have them, they know you're good. And now it's almost, I want to joke, it's like this word of mouth that it's like, you really do this and help people and friends.
Right.
Tell me, where do you, like, maybe foreshadowing, do you feel like this is another path for you? What would you like to do with this?
I like to continue to help people, and I think that gives me purpose. I think with 20,000 people on my family tree, I've sort of gotten about as many as I can do, and
it's time to help others.
Helping others it has been very rewarding when I've done it. And to see that they are making discoveries and tying connections to history and to people has been rewarding. So I would like to do more of it. And the adoption reunion thing is another thing. I have enjoyed helping people. And if I had others who were interested, I would definitely pursue that. I'm still working full time, but I see the next few years, I will be an empty nester with a college graduate and more time on my hands to be able to pursue.
And you love it.
I do.
And I'm not discrediting. You've had a great, fabulous career at Delta too, but this has triggered a lot of what you're really good at: being creative, researching, your intuition,
right?
All of that, finding connections. And that's another topic we can talk about another time. But you have that, and you don't give up.
Right, persistence
and perseverance is both. You've both.
Yeah, so. Because you'll hit a dead end, and you'll say, well, there's got to be another way. So you sort of take a back door, and then you make a discovery, and that makes it even more exciting. And
that's amazing. What would you, if you had to give, and I always joke I could talk to you forever. We do talk, regularly. But what's the one piece of advice you'd have for someone that really wants to kick off to try to look into this? What would you recommend?
It's super easy. If you go onto ancestry.com and set up your account, I believe it's about $20 a month.
Yeah. And not a paid. This is not a paid
Not a
sponsorship.
paid sponsorship.
But it really is a great site.
Yeah, but it'll get you started.
Yeah.
And just getting started is the first. It will be an impetus towards a lot of information that's already there and that you'll be able to build on, and then getting your DNA done, because that really for me was a confirmation, because when you find that you have a second great grandfather and someone on your DNA list also lists that person as their second great grandfather, then you know that your research has been confirmed by a shared DNA person. And so those are the two main elements. Just get on and get started and take a DNA test, and it will be fairly easy to get a lot of information.
That's amazing. So if someone wants to reach out to you and they're interested in having this, are you open to helping other people?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay. Yeah. So what I can do is put Cynthia has an email address. I'm happy to share that. If you want to reach out and just, get started and have her help you, really, because part of it is also time. This isn't you don't do this in an afternoon. It's a lot of research.
It does take time.
And you've also, your expertise, you've been doing this for
years, a long time.
We've talked about this years ago.
Yeah.
And so that, having that expertise can also help. So.
Right. Yeah. I can do things very quickly, whereas other people need time to ramp up and to get familiar, and awesome. I know where to look, and it's interesting and fun. So that makes the perfect combination for a good hobby or a little side hustle.
Oh, I love it. I love it. Well, as we talked about, it's so important, no matter what, to know your past and know your future and tie it all together. Right. And, you make me want to go through all my boxes of photos. Just piecing together those black and white ones that mine, a lot of them are from Germany. So I'm I need to figure out how to do that. That to me, I'm always overwhelmed.
We'll do it after this.
Let's do it later with a few cocktails. So I want to leave, and thank you so much for talking about this. And this is really just such a cool topic that I've loved seeing you, really embrace, but you're so good at it. And it's fun to see you rejuvenated, really helping others and figuring it out for yourself.
Yep.
So I leave everyone with one final question. Okay. So what empowers you, or what inspires you? Either combination.
I think what inspires me is helping people. And it doesn't have to be just this genealogy people. In my job each day, I'm faced with challenges that help people. I have my son, and it's been a joy to help raise him and to see him excel. So it gives me, I think that's the thing that gives me a reason to get up every day, is to help others in small and larger ways.
Yeah. And you do that every day. You really do, and you've always been inspiring to me. As I say, I am so happy you're in my life. You've helped me get through some of the challenges in my world. And I can't wait to see this next chapter for you.
Absolutely.
And we're gonna have a lot of fun with, being empty nester. Yeah. But I'm excited for your next chapter as
Thank
you.
You.
A little bit of it'll be so good, and your son's gonna thrive. And thank you for talking about genealogy. And I'm sure there's other topics. You'll see Cynthia again another time. And thank you so much for joining Herstories today.